If Kansas winds up being in the Big 12 title race in football, certainly their last three games, including Utah and Iowa State, are going to factor heavily into whether they're down in Arlington or not. We have an early preview of KU's final three games of the season.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks, and thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching all of our episodes wherever you get your shows, whether it's on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts. And on today's edition of LOJ, we have our Big 12 finales. Early look at the Arizona Wildcats, the Iowa State Cyclones, and the Utah Utes. Tough schedule for KU to finish out the year. And if they are in Big 12 title contention, certainly going to be interesting with some of those matchups. We'll also get into a running back room preview led by Daniel Hishaw and LaShawn Williams on today's episode to round things out. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Football season's around the corner, baby. Visit FanDuel, the FanDuel app today, and start planning your future bets now. Okay, so let's get things started with KU's 10th game of the season. That would be the Arizona Wildcats. Arizona is coming off a 4-8 season. They went 2-7 in Big 12 play in their inaugural year, joining over from the Pac-12. And it was a bit ugly for Arizona, just 21.8 points per game, 31.8 points per game allowed last season. Now they're picked 15th in the Big 12 by Phil Steele, 14th by ESPN SP+, which has them 60th nationally, 51st offense, 67th defense there. But I think this team's going to be better than they were a season ago. They had a lot of injuries last year. They basically had the reverse close game. Like, we talk about close game luck, one-score game luck all the time. It's very applicable to Kansas this year, who went 1-5 in one-score games a season ago. Well, Arizona was unbelievably good in one-score games in 2023. They end up winning double-digit games as a result of it. Last year, they were really bad in one-score games. Now, they had other games that they got blown out in. Certainly, you think of the game in Manhattan against Kansas State. But maybe you get more of an in-between, a neutral setting this year. And that would just be one example of a team where it, flips over one year to the next, something Kansas is hoping for the reverse of this year. But I do think Arizona is going to be better than 4-8 this season. Big 12 obviously provides opportunities to do that, where we saw Arizona State go from being picked worst in the Big 12 to end up winning the conference. And I'm not saying they're going to do that. I'm not saying they're going to do what Arizona State did, but Brent Brennan was a really good coach at San Jose State. I don't think that went away overnight. I think he was left with a tough circumstance at Arizona, and I think he's going to get things figured out a little bit more in year two. And so on paper, you look at this game and you say, oh, this is one of KU's more winnable games. It's at Arizona. They were 2-7 in Big 12 play. I think sometimes we get too caught up in strength of schedule being based on last year's record, especially in the Big 12, where there's going to be surprise teams all the time. It would not surprise me if Arizona is a bowl team, if they're a 6 or 7 win team. And so playing on the road against what could be a 6 or 7 win team is much different than playing against a team on the road who could be one of the worst teams in the Big 12. And by the end of the year could quit on the season a little bit more. Those are two different things depending on the outcome and avenue that Arizona goes to. So you look at some key players on the roster. Third team pick by Phil Steele, offensive guard Alexander Dust. Fourth team receiver Luke Wysong. It's actually a deeper receiver group this year, but they don't have the star in Tet McMillan, so it'll be interesting to see how they do there. Still the same quarterback, Noah Fifita. He is kind of similar to Jalen Daniels in terms of we've now seen the highs and lows. The highs of Noah Fifita in 2023 was first team all Pac-12. The lows was, I think, 18 touchdowns to 13 interceptions last year, similar to Jalen Daniels in terms of, we've seen the ups and downs. Defensive line, they've got Trey Smith, second team pick by Phil Steele at the defensive end. They've got Genesis Smith as a safety. He leads a DB group that lost a lot, but if they have a better front seven, it's going to help the back end. Overall, Phil Steele gives them receiver, defensive back, and quarterback as the top position groups, according to the rest of the conference for Arizona, with the defensive line, the offensive line, the two worst on the team compared to the rest of the league. Though the offensive line, I think, could be a bit of a wild card. Like, this could go either way. They could either just not mesh and they could be horrible, or maybe they get some surprises. They have 7 transfer additions, including 4 who were starters at their last stops, which is kind of similar to the defensive line. They've got a bunch of JUCO transfers, though, so a little bit different in that light. And one thing that I think is going to really add to the intrigue of this game is Keon Burnett transferring back to Arizona. The reason it adds intrigue isn't, I mean, I guess if you want to call it like a revenge game for KU, that they're mad that Keon Burnett transferred in and transferred. I'm less interested in that. I'm more interested in the idea that Keon Burnett transferred into Kansas, spent however long, I don't know, 3 months, 4 months, learning the playbook, knowing the playbook. Does he have the playbook? Is he just going to give the playbook, all the signals, all the signs, whatever KU's doing to the Arizona coaching staff, and they're going to know everything Kansas is doing? That would be a bit of a problem for KU. So I don't know. It feels like there shouldn't be something allowed there, but whatever. One thing that could help KU, that's something that could hurt KU in this game, is that they're going to be coming off, Arizona, I mean, a road trip to Boulder. Does the altitude make it tougher for them to recover? Right? Does playing in Colorado the week before for Arizona make it tougher coming back off altitude, playing against Kansas the next week? But overall, this is the first meeting between these schools since 1966 when Kansas won 35-13 on the road. So that's the Arizona game. Now, the next one up is at Iowa State. And this is a team that you've beat 3 consecutive times. And certainly I think there is a diverging path with Kansas and Iowa State. 2 programs that, you know, they're not the biggest bustling cities in the world. They're small town Midwestern cities. They're 2 programs that are doing more with less. They're 2 programs where they have passionate fan bases. And when Lance Leipold went up there and Kansas got destroyed in 2021, they kind of took the Iowa State model as a bit of one they wanted to replicate themselves. And now since then, they have beaten Iowa State 3 consecutive times. But Iowa State's coming off an 11-3 season. That's the most wins in school history. They played in the Big 12 title game, and then they won their bowl game. Averaged 31 points per game, gave up 23. Phil Steele is now picking them tied first in the Big 12. They're 7th in the conference, though, on ESPN SP+, so much different there. 32nd nationally there with the 33rd offense, 29th defense. FPI has Iowa State tied 9th in the league. So some of the computers not as high as some of the humans on Iowa State this year, but I think Iowa State's going to be solid. I mean, Matt Campbell has always presented solid teams in Ames. I can't help but think, though, that like, okay, Iowa State just won their most games in school history. How often do teams, we saw it with Kansas, they won the Orange Bowl in 2008 of the 2007 season, and the following year, still had a really good year, successful season, they went 8-5. You know, if you even want to look back to winning 9 games in 2023, they won 5 then. A lot of times you don't see these schools repeat that often for whatever reason it is, right? And what are the odds of them winning all those games again? So I think they could be 7-8, maybe 9-win team, especially, but like they were +4 in 1-score games last year. You know, maybe they were closer to being a 9-win team that just had the goods in close games. And I think from the Kansas perspective, you look at Iowa State as one of those teams that was kind of inverse of you in those 1-score games. So you look at the roster, though, they've got Phil Steele's top running back unit. Carson Hansen leads the way there, 13 pick by him. Chase Sowell is a 13 pick at receiver, but big shoes to fill. I mean, this is probably not going to be as good of a receiving core. Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel are 2 pros, 2 day 2 picks level pros. They're very good receivers. They're gone. Third team offensive tackle Tyler Miller. It's a very experienced offensive line. Phil Steele gives the number 2 offensive line unit in the conference. They have 105 starts. I will say, though, I don't think this Iowa State offensive line is one that's going to blow you away. I think it's one that is being picked high because of the experience. That doesn't necessarily mean it's A+ players. It could be a lot of Bs, which, you know, I think they'll be solid. I just don't know that it's going to end up being the number 2 offensive line in the conference. Rocco Becht is 4th team. He's thrown a TD in 18 straight games. He's now year 3 as a starter. I think Rocco Becht is a solid quarterback. I'll be very interested to see how good he is, though, without those 2 stud receivers, right? Could there be a step back in the production this year? Then you look at the defense. They consistently have one of the best defenses, not just in the conference, but in the country. Like SP Plus has them as the number 29 defense. I would be picking them to finish better than that on the defensive end. Dominic Orange is a former somebody that KU was targeting as a high school player, and he's a stud. First team pick by Phil Steele in Big 12, but they did lose 3 starters up front, so going to be replacing stuff there. They're always good at the back end. Jontez Williams at corner and Jeremiah Cooper at safety are both first-team picks by Phil Steele. Should be another studly DB core for them. They've been top 3 in pass defense ranking on Phil Steele's magazine the last 3 seasons, so they've been elite there. They lose some good players, but again, you have those two studs, and it's just a program pipeline thing where it's like, there are certain positions that every program seems to just be able to produce, and you don't really worry about it. And that's one of those with Iowa State. Now, you look at linebacker, this is a position that was beat up for them last year. I mean, I think at points they were on their third and fourth string linebackers. So that created an opportunity where now they have a ton of guys who have playing experience and depth, and players coming back from injury. Linebacking core could actually be pretty good this year. It could go from being super thin last year because of injuries to now all of a sudden the strength because of that. I think the biggest questions you look at are outside of Dominic Orange, and I guess outside of Chase Sowell, receiver and D-line are the biggest position questions for Iowa State coming into the year. But overall, again, KU's won 3 straight in this series, and that includes winning in Ames, which they're going to have to do this year in 2025. They did that back in 2023. Now, Iowa State's coming off a bye this go-around, and it's senior day for the Cyclones. And that's going to be a bunch of seniors who, were key pieces on a team that went to the Big 12 title game and won the most games in school history. So they're going to be very proud about kind of trying to defend that. So this is probably going to be KU's toughest time beating Iowa State. Maybe you would have said it was last year, though, because of how good Iowa State was. And Kansas at the time was what? They would have been 2-6, 3-6, whatever it was. And they found a way to beat them. And what ended up being a 9-point game, but was probably further away from what the final score and how close that game was for a majority of the game. So should be an interesting one. And if Kansas is in Big 12 title contention at the end of the year, if this is a season where Kansas ends up, being an 8, 9, 10 win team, then if Iowa State is truly one of those teams who you consider a Big 12 title contender, which I think they kind of are, same with Utah, who we're about to talk about next, these could be games that decide whether you go to Arlington or not. So let's get to the Utah Utes next, then we'll get to our running back preview. This episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day. That's coming up in about a week and a half. Brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel's giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. And you can even get college basketball futures if you want to get in on that for KU hoops. You can get, FedEx Cup playoffs is going on for golf right now. You can get in on the action for some of the golf action going on. You can even get who's going to win the Super Bowl, who's going to win the MVP, who's going to win the Heisman. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day away and one day only. FanDuel, play your game, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Don't forget to make Locked On College Football, Locked On College Basketball your second listen every day. Okay, so KU's final game of the regular season is versus Utah, and another team that, some of the prognosticators, I mean, they're ranked in the preseason top 25 despite a 5-7 season. I think there's reasons for that we're about to go over. I'm high on what this Utah team could be coming into the year as I've continued to dive deeper into these teams, read some more preseason magazines. I really like Utah and Baylor, I think, at the top of the Big 12 coming into this year. But, that means it's an opportunity for Kansas where, what if Kansas is sitting at 8-3 or something coming into the last game of the season? What if Utah's sitting at 9-2 and a win for Kansas at home, pushes them ahead of them and gives them an opportunity to do some pretty amazing things. But overall, Utah is coming off a 5-7 season last year. They were kind of similar to Kansas. I mean, 5-7 is the same record as Kansas, but also similar to Kansas, who was 1-5. So -4 from that perspective in one-score games. Guess what? Utah was -4 in one-score games last season. And that's the inverse of Iowa State, who we just talked about, and BYU, right? This is just kind of be the world of the Big 12. There's going to be teams who are spurned by one-score games, and there's going to be teams who live up to the moment in those games and have those special moments. So now Utah's actually tied first in the Big 12 by Phil Steele, 6th by ESPN Plus, and ESPN FPI only has them 9th, but I'm a little bit higher on him. I think you trust Kyle Whittingham. They added the offensive coordinator from New Mexico from last year, who did a really good job with Les there. That was a nice add. And even in a down year, 5-7, they had one of the best defenses in the entire country. So that was a consistent. I also don't think it helped them with the Cam Rising saga. Now, Cam Rising was a really productive, good player over college football for Utah for a lot of years. But with how it got to last year, it was like, is he going to play? Is he not? It's kind of hampering the team. Like, it just becomes a distraction. It becomes all the storylines. The team's wondering, then the backups aren't very good. And then it just continues the story, and everybody's hoping for this savior to come in when it's just not available. It becomes a distraction. The fact that they've moved on from that, I think, is just going to clear these players' minds. And this is the best offensive line in the Big 12, and it's one of the best offensive lines in the country. Spencer Fano is a first-team pick by Phil Steele at offensive tackle. He's being seen as a possible top 5 or 10 pick in the NFL draft. Caleb Lomu, Phil Steele only has as a second-team pick in the preseason Big 12 team. He's also being seen, though, as somebody who could be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. So I thought he could have been a first-team pick there. But that's, I mean, you can make the argument that's the best bookend of offensive tackles in the country. And then they have other experience on the offensive line. They have a top 3 position group by Phil Steele at every level of defense, led by Lander Barton, the linebacker, Logan Fano on defensive end, Dallas Vakalahi at defensive tackle. Lost a pretty good amount on the defensive line, but similar to what we were saying with Iowa State and DBs, Utah refills the defensive line and consistently has guys getting drafted. And overall, they've consistently just been a strong run stuffing team with their front 7. That'll make it difficult for KU, who traditionally over these Lance Leipold years has been a team who wants to pound the rock and run the football. We'll see what it is under Jim Zabrowski, but they also have a kind of linebacker safety hybrid, Smith Snowden, who's really good. Back end was stellar last year. They were number 3 nationally in Phil Steele's pass defense ratings. That's something we mentioned. Iowa State was top 3 in the conference the last 3 years. Utah was number 3 in the country last year. So some losses, some returners, some transfers per usual, but should be good. Maybe not as elite as they were in 2024, but they might be better in other spots. I think the biggest questions for Utah coming into the year, it's skill players on offense. They lost some good players there. They brought in some pretty productive transfers, but a lot of them are coming from smaller schools. That includes the quarterback, Devin Dampier, who put up unbelievable rushing stats at New Mexico. But it's a question of, okay, how good of a thrower is he going to be? And how good are these skill players going to be? But there's a chance that even if the skill players aren't great, even if Utah doesn't have the most explosive offense, if they're just a better running team and they have a trustworthy offensive line and a quarterback who never gets sacked, that's the thing, Dampier with his scrambling has one of the lowest sack rates in the country. If you're avoiding negative plays, you're a solid running team. Even if you're not the best passing team and you have a good defense special teams, which Utah usually does, that's going to put them in contention to win the Big 12 on its own. And then if they do get something extra from Dampier at quarterback and passing game, that's where they could be, have kind of the special season that people were wondering if they could have last year in their first year in the Big 12. I think it just comes a year later this year. But on the bright side, I will say for KU, this is Utah's 3rd straight game. And it's not just their 3rd straight game. I mean, I guess that's really not that many straight games, but it's who they're playing in those first 2 games. It's at Baylor, which Baylor, I think, is one of the other best teams in the Big 12 this year, and it's on the road. And then it's at home against Kansas State, which Kansas State's going to be a physical football team, and they're also going to be one of the better teams in the Big 12. And then on top of that, it's a short week. This is a Friday game, a Black Friday game for KU. So KU gets them off 2 really tough games. Emotions should be high, should be physical. They get them on a short week after that. It's Thanksgiving week. You're distracted. You're playing on the road. It'll be senior day for KU football. I think a lot about the schedule actually lines up nicely for when and how they play Utah in this game specifically. And interestingly enough, these schools haven't played since 1996. KU's last win in the series was in the 1950s, but they've only played 4 times. It's 2-2 in the season series. So who's going to win the rubber match this year between KU and Utah? All right, let's get to our running back room preview. Daniel Hishaw, is he about to break out for, 1,000-yard season, all Big 12 candidacy? What about LaShawn Williams? What about the young guys? We'll get to that next. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Wayfair. As summer winds down, there's something nice about getting back into a routine you love, and Wayfair makes it easy to set yourself up for the season ahead. From bedding and linens to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair is your one-stop shop to refresh your home. I think this is a go-to now for what's coming ahead, which is holiday shopping. You're looking for something great to get your mom or your significant other, or just one of your friends, or maybe your dad really wants to deck out his man cave or something. You can find a bunch of stuff. I mean, Wayfair, it's your one-stop shop for everything. You want to get a new rug, maybe you spilled too many times on your friend's rug and you want to, reciprocate and get him something nice. I also love that it's a great spot for making sure that wherever I mentioned the man cave, your watching situation is for the college football season, beef it up. Go to Wayfair. Find that couch or find that extra piece of furniture that's just going to make that room pop a little bit more and make you enjoy being in there, because you're going to be in there for lots of hours in the fall. So get organized, refresh, and back to routine for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to get shop all things home. That's wayfair.com, WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Jayhawks. And again, thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. All right, our running back room overview. We're going to start with our starter possibilities. I think that would be two players. The first is Daniel Hishaw Jr., who I think is the favorite to be the starter for KU football. 5'10", 220-pound redshirt senior. He has almost 1,500 career rushing yards, 5.3 career yards per carry, 18 touchdowns, which low-key, if he gets 5 this season, which you would expect him to as long as he stays healthy, that would get him into the top 5 at KU all-time in career. Also, like 900 rushing yards gets him into the top 10 on that, ahead of Puka Williams, who's just hanging on in the top 10. And Hishaw, obviously, this power running back, I'm excited for what he could do in the future role. No Devin Neal. Big question for Hishaw is just going to be, can he stay healthy? And can he not fumble the football? He's had some fumbling issues in the past. LaShawn Williams is the other guy that transferred from Iowa, 5'10", 215-pound redshirt senior. I think he'll be the backup to Hishaw, but he's probably still going to get a lot of carries, right? Could be kind of a 1A, 1B situation. Williams, 5'10", 215-pound redshirt senior, over 1,300 career rushing yards, 4.2 per carry, 3 touchdowns. I could see a world. I mean, if Hishaw is struggling with fumbling football, Williams presents a more safe opportunity. Hishaw is more of your explosive guy, and Hishaw is probably more of your goal line guy with the ability to get to the end zone. But if Hishaw can hold on to the football, he could legitimately be an all Big 12 running back. That's how talented this guy is. I mean, he was on the freaks list that Bruce Feldman did for the Athletic. Now, players battling for the 2 deep. If the 2 deep is from a literal sense, 2 guys, it'll be Hishaw and Williams. I feel very confident that that'll be the case. However, sometimes we see Kansas do this. They'll say Hishaw or Williams for the number 1 running back. And because they do an or, they'll be like, okay, well, then we'll show you what the backup spot is to that. And if that ends up happening, then I think it ends up being one of Harry Stewart III or Johnny Thompson. So Stewart was a 3-star recruit, 88 rated in his class. He's a redshirt freshman, 5'10", 215 pounds. And then Thompson, a 5'11", 200-pound redshirt sophomore, was an 87 rated 3-star. Thompson has another year of experience and in the system on his belt as Stewart. Stewart's slightly higher rated at the high school level, though it's kind of splitting hairs between the two. It'll be very interesting to see who wins out on that battle, because sure, there's going to be some carries for the 3rd-string running back. There always is for Kansas, but it's more so about Williams and Hishaw are both seniors. So whichever guy wins out that 3rd-string running back battle has the leg up, clearly, to be the starting running back in 2026. And then your future guys to watch, obviously Stewart and Thompson, to that notion. John Kelly, who's a 6'1", 190-pound freshman, 87 rated 3-star. Justin Thurman, 6'1", 190-pound true freshman. Both those guys incoming true freshmen, 86 rated 3-star there. Could they factor in to the future starting running back for KU? And then you have Micah Johnson, 5'10", 200-pound redshirt freshman. Jack Schneider, 6'3", 195-pound redshirt sophomore on the roster as well to help out during practice and with depth for the team. I think the biggest questions and storylines for the running back room, it has to be the health and the fumbling, right? With Hishaw, he's had some injuries in the past. You just hope he stays healthy and can have that great season that you expect from him. He can go off, get drafted into the NFL and accomplish all of his goals. But health has been a question there. With LaShawn Williams, I don't know how much he was beat up last year, how much was just getting beat out by Caleb Johnson, but I think he's had to deal with some injury stuff too. And then with young players, it's like you just don't know where that's going to be. As far as the fumbling, yeah, same with young players. You don't know how it's going to be, and that's maybe more of a question just for Daniel Hishaw. I think another question here from the running back room, what's Kansas going to get from the running back room in terms of receiving the ball? Devin Neal was a pretty good receiver. It didn't always, show up as like 5 catches per game, but like he had some good games receiving. Hishaw only has 12 career catches. Now, funny enough, Daniel Hishaw's probably most memorable highlight is off a reception, but only 12 throughout his career. Williams has more throughout his career, but the most he's ever had in a season is 12, which still is not that much. So what is Kansas going to get receiving from the backfield? Do we see a player do we see Emmanuel Henderson, who's a former high school running back, flex into the backfield, or a guy like Cam Pickett there? Do we see one of those young freshmen, Harry Stewart, Johnny Thompson, maybe somebody who's, super fast and electric? Because maybe some of those guys are quicker or faster than Hishaw and Williams, who are maybe a little bit more pounders and rumblers. Do we see that? And so I think the final thought here with running back, if Hishaw stays healthy, and avoids fumbling issues, I think he can be an all Big 12 level running back. He's got the athleticism, he's got the strength, he's got the power. I think he's going to get the usage and on an offense that likes to run the football. If either of those things plagues him, I think Williams going to be set up for a nice year. He's steady. He doesn't have quite the explosion maybe as a Hishaw or Devin Neal before him or Puka Williams or whatever, but I think he'll just be a steady back and somebody you can rely upon. And so this room is not going to be Devin Neal, but this should still be a solid room. This should still be a good enough room for you to accomplish all your goals and do everything you want to this season. And I'm really excited that I hope Hishaw can stay healthy so he can have that season where he puts it all together, because the talent is burgeoning from this senior running back. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. See you next time for LOJ.